Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The True Slaps. Juan Chaloa here, John Quez. So today we're going to just trade questions back and forth. I'm Mexican / Native American racially, and John Quez is a black person, African American, right?
Yeah.
Grew up here. I was born in Mexico and I was brought here when I was 4 years old. And I think we share a lot of similarities in terms of our experiences here, especially in the South and Alabama. But there are going to be significant differences, and that's what I thought was interesting to bring up. So we're going to be trading questions back and forth, and these are off-the-cuff questions. I just wrote mine down. He wrote his. I don't know what he's going to ask me. He doesn't know what I'm going to ask him. So I guess I will start with my question. So, John Quez, would you say that black identity, is it ethno-cultural, is it cultural, is it ethnicity, or is it a racial identity? What would you say fits it the best?
Is it ethno-cultural, cultural, or a racial identity?
Yes.
I mean, I'm going to probably say it would make the most sense saying in the sense of it being probably racial, just in the simple fact that it doesn't really matter. You can be black as the sun or yellow and you still fall under the banner. So, that mentality carries across all kinds of black people. Like even within my family, you have all the range of skin tones. Not everyone's definitively 100% black. Didn't really exist anyways. But that's not like a thing for real. So I would say that it just exists amongst. It's just under the race of being a black American as a whole. That's where the culture resides, because that experience of being slaves brought over and having to rewrite our identity of culture, all of us had to do that as a unit, despite what inputs of other, I guess, ethnicities that were involved in some of these family lines. They're still black definitively. So I would say that would be the answer to that. But yeah. All right, Juan, my question for you is something that I've always wondered about. Do you think that in the U.S., Mexicans are more discriminated against than other Hispanic groups or Latinos?
Mexicans in particular?
Mexicans in particular.
Instead of other, let's say Puerto Ricans, Guatemalans, or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
I think so, yes, because this goes into the ignorance aspect of a lot of white Americans, where they will call anybody that looks like me Mexican. They could be from another country, but they all say Mexican. So it seems to be this special hatred specifically for Mexicans. Obviously other Hispanic Latino groups have this problem, right?
Yeah.
However, it seems to always be attributed to Mexicans, and there's a lot of hypocrisy that frustrates me, because you see white Americans go out and they'll celebrate Cinco de Mayo. They don't even know why the hell they're celebrating it. They don't even know the history. They'll wear the sombrero, they'll eat the tacos, and they'll put on a fake mustache, and the very next day they'll go back to treating us like complete garbage. And so, I would say so. And to go a little deeper, why would I say Mexicans in particular? Where there's something that a lot of people don't know. When it comes to Hispanics and Latinos, which I don't want to get too deep into, but they're made up of different races. So you can have for example, in Puerto Rico, you have black Puerto Ricans, you have white Puerto Ricans mostly. You don't really have many Native American Puerto Ricans because they were wiped out by colonialism. Whereas in Mexico, you have those Native American people like me and people that are darker than me. So there's differences. So a Puerto Rican might not face as much discrimination because they are very white passing. A lot of them are.
Yeah.
Whereas somebody from Mexico, someone from Guatemala, Peru, they're going to have really brown Native American features, and that's going to subject them to more hate. But I think some of it may be even historical, like the Mexican American War. I think some people.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's an interesting question, but I would say they harbor a little more hatred for Mexicans than anybody else.
Okay.
I was going to ask you. Are black people, would you say that you guys are more racially unified than, say, other racial groups?
Yeah. I don't really think there's, much of a choice, realistically. Kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, is you kind of have to have that with, if you're established from a culture and it no longer exists, and that is the unification that you guys exist under, you don't really have a choice but to be that way. It's like a large safety net, so it just becomes a thing. So even though you have that thing where like a lot of people can, they'll ask somebody like me if I'm of mixed race, right? And for myself, and that's me doing my genetics test, it says I'm 84% black, which is
Right.
a lot more than what you would expect from me. And I've always considered myself to be a black guy. I don't really think anything specific of that. I consider myself to be amongst that unification of black people. So it's just, we're all black. That's the way I look at it. I don't really get into like the fine-tuned area of it. So yeah, I would say we're much more racially unified. Because I think other groups, they have a reason to try to, some of them don't. Some of them do it for like an identity crisis based. Like some people spend time identifying what specifics like of their European that they have or things like that. But like for us, if we had that, like it's not like I'm Nigerian, he's Egyptian. We're like, we don't know. We're black. You know what I mean? So that's just the racial identification. It's like that's what we're underneath. It's just we're black. So yeah, I would say that that's the case.
I would. I'd like to comment on that. Just saying, like, I think that I admire that about you guys because you're more, the black community in the U.S. is more able to work together to achieve something, whereas other racial groups, like I know my people, like we're natives, but half of us don't even know we're natives, and then those that do, then there's these, oh well, you're not 100%, and then there's this like, you're half, and it's just it's a mess, and that I think that really sabotages us. That's why you see so much division within my group of people, which is so frustrating because we could have accomplished many things, but we can't be divided like that. And you guys are very unified, and so that's why you've been able to accomplish much with civil rights movements and things like that.
Yeah, that is just general acceptance of our identity happened a lot earlier. So I would say that's. It does make us accomplish things. So yeah. My next question is: in a general sense, we know that in the U.S., immigration is a huge topic, and especially we're in regards to Mexicans. For yourself, what do you think are the main things that could be like adjustments to the process? Because it's not easy, obviously. So, what do you think are the things that probably should change? It's obviously to keep it intact for the sense of what it's supposed to do for the country and getting people in, but not to have it so freaking hard.
Right. I would say the best thing you could probably do, because right now it's very hard to immigrate legally. You need, like right now it's mostly luck. Like you would need to have a family member that's already a citizen, and then they can petition on your behalf. Well, I mean that's not viable for the average person living in Mexico or living in south of the border.
Yeah.
So the other one is employer preference, but the standards are ridiculous, and it begs the question of like because of these standards, like if you meet those standards, why would you even leave Mexico or this other country if you're already doing well? Like that's how high the standards are. It's like what's the point of even leaving? Like that's what I'm saying. There is no. I just graduated high school and I'm 18 and I'm gonna go work hard like the American dream and do a better life. There is no avenue for that person to come to the U.S. legally speaking and accomplish that. It's impossible. There's no way.
Yeah.
So what I would propose would be maybe if people had student visas and they were coming to study in the U.S. at university, maybe have the student visas be able to lead to a process to where they can gain citizenship eventually. Maybe they finish the university here in the U.S. and they have the bachelor's degree, and that's the first step, and then they're granted a visa, and then they finish the visa, they get the green card, and it leads to something, right? Because, I mean, why that would work in the country's favor, because then you have people that are educated here at universities with degrees staying here.
Yeah.
Like, that would be good. And that would give an incentive to young students abroad. Try your best, get into an American college, and you can try, and then you have your pathway to citizenship. That's one method. Maybe a method of like merit based, like to where like maybe if like it's just the average Joe living in another country, maybe there could be a method to where I don't know, maybe a skills test in certain things, or just some way to be able to give people an opportunity to just get the initial paperwork to go ahead and come over. So I don't know. There's various methods, but it's just like there's not enough options for somebody to be able to legally immigrate, and then you combine that with the extreme poverty and violence in these countries, and I mean you combine that with desperate people, and and you get the result where they come here illegally because they have no choice.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have that misconception that you can just apply, like as if I could go online and apply at McDonald's, I can do the same thing. It's like that's that's not the case. You can't do it.
Yeah.
All
right.
I was gonna ask. Okay, because you've told me somewhat of this, but I haven't heard a bunch of crazy stories from you. But what racism have you experienced here living in the South? Like of things that you've
What racism have I experienced? I would say. So I've always said this in general. I've never had somebody throw a slur or anything. Obviously, that extreme. I'm not saying this stuff doesn't happen, but I don't normally encounter that kind of thing. So I would say most of the things I had were prejudice and just people having natural built assumptions, or where they felt it was okay to say certain jokes at certain times. I think I may have told you about that incident where that person, I'm not gonna name a name, but in high school had made some buffalo dip for some party thing, and it was a chicken dip, and I looked questionable about how it tasted, and she said, I thought black people were supposed to like chicken, and it's yeah, but you as a white person shouldn't really feel comfortable just saying that freely. Yeah. I was just realistically, I didn't make a huge fuss about it, but the simple fact that things like that happen here and there, that's something. And plus, where we are, certain cities aren't very comfortable to be in. Yeah. And I haven't been in those places very often, but when I have been, I haven't looked at differently. So it's always kind of just what is this person doing here? And obviously I could attribute that to the fact that I just stand out by comparison. But why is it that it's so severe if everyone's not really supposed to be paying attention to that as a whole? And maybe I'm a black guy in an area that's predominantly white. Should it be ignored? It should be ignored, in my opinion. I don't really think about it too heavily in other environments. But I would like to say, even though it might not be the case for a lot of people, but I feel when it's the opposite, when a white person is in a predominantly black environment, the ability to accept them is a lot higher than when it's the other way around. Yeah. So I think that's probably just something that I've noticed. So so for myself, I would say that's kind of what I've experienced, is that, and just the general consensus of just the pressure of, I guess the standards are kind of set by white people. So you have that thing about even certain things where it's I moved from one school to the inner city, predominantly black, and I go somewhere else, and it's the educational standards are high, and it's all right, I have this bearing weight, and then they know where I came from, so there's an assumption that this is not going to be an advanced placement kid, even though I was still proved myself to do it. But it's everything takes proof. That's kind of the thing that I've noticed, or that kind of weird thing of I'm a very articulate, proper person when speaking. I'm often assumed that I wouldn't sound the way that I do. So that's another thing. It's they expect to have more slang out of me or anything like that. And it's not to say that I don't do it. It's just, why is it that's the most assumed way that I would talk? That's what I'm that's not really good. These, like I say, these things are things that I can look past, but these are needles constantly thrown as you're growing up, and they adjust how you view white people. And I'm not saying that I'm prejudiced towards white people or anything. I would say my majority of my friend base are primarily white people, but that is something that just happens as just being growing up black. It just does. So yeah, I would say those are my experiences.
Yeah, I just want to throw a little comment, because I know some people that get all butthurt that we talk about race and racial issues, but
yeah,
the thing is, you might chalk that up and saying, oh, that's nothing, But the thing is, that stuff racks up over time. If you experience that day by day over years, that racks up. It takes a toll on you.
Yeah.
It takes a toll on you.
It definitely does. So that kind of thing bleeding over time. So what happens often with people is that argument ends up being that, it's not as bad as your ancestors. I'm trust me, most people know that. They don't think that they're experiencing what their ancestors went through. But the fact is that there's still these little things left over from that haven't completely died, and everybody's getting a little dose, whether it's a smaller bit of it over time. Everyone's getting a little dose of it. So, and most people don't think about it because it's well, if you're not having that going on, you wouldn't know. It didn't happen to you, so why would you even have any clue about that? So, Yeah, so don't prejudge when people talk about that kind of stuff. It's not like they're looking for room to be racist towards white people or anything like that. It's just in the general sense, if you're going through something, if something's uncomfortable like that, it's common that most people want to discuss that common thread of those little acts of prejudice over time, whether they were supposed to be jokes or whatever. But recognize that likelihood is it's probably not happening to you if you're a white person. So don't make comments about that. But yeah. On to my next question, because you kind of actually sort of brought this up when it came up to the immigration process. But what do you think is overall the biggest misconception about Mexicans?
The biggest misconceptions, I would say, it's an interesting question. Probably that we're all illegal. A bunch of it, like there's just this. It's just kind of silly. That runs like there's plenty of, because I think even Trump like had rhetoric as if like we were all illegal, and it's like completely ignoring all the people that are Mexican that are born in this country. So
oh yeah,
it's like there's this thing called birthright citizenship. A lot of us have it. I didn't have it, right? But so that's one big misconception. Another one would probably be, I'm trying to think here. That we all just like look the same. Like that's another, that goes into another thing, like the whole race stuff. Like you can have Mexicans that are white, you can have Mexicans that are black, you can have Mexicans that are Asian. Like there's multiple races in Mexico. Like now you'll see more people that look like me or darker and indigenous. That's the primary race, but there's plenty of people that are a different race. And so that's why you'll see some of that diversity. And you shouldn't invalidate other Mexicans that don't look like me, because it's still a nationality. So they can be any race. Just how anybody can be any race and be a U.S. citizen. It's the same thing with Mexico. So
for sure.
That's a common misconception.
Like the Canelo Alvarez dude I was talking about. Like the fact that he's a ginger white guy. He's a Mexican. So but all right.
What would you say is the biggest obstacle for black people in this country?
The biggest obstacle. I would say, so it seems like the biggest obstacle for a lot of people, black people, would have a lot to do with the, I guess I'm gonna term it urbanization, but it has a lot to do with the whole like ability to have a bunch of black people in one area, keep them condensed on their how much money they make, and then put them in systems that they all fail to graduate from and then make it in jail. It's like it's a loop. So it's very financial. The ability to control the demographic of where black people live versus letting them just allowing them to just succumb to like government assistance the whole way through their lives. I think that's like one of the biggest things, because you catch that challenge where it's like, you know, you have a person like me where like, this person seems to be doing good in their life, but it's like they had to claw because there was no like foundation of financial intelligence or anything that's provided to communities like that. They're very neglected. So I think that's the biggest thing, you know, is paying attention to the school systems that they're involved with and all that stuff, because their prosperity in life, like, it's not the same. Likelihood is you're going to get a lot more black people that struggle in finances and whatnot. More commonly, you have all these other people just, you know, they kind of have everything just going in a normal process. Their parents are able to actually pay for their college. And I'm not saying this is every white person or anybody else that has this. I'm not saying that doesn't exist. Like that those poverty lines or whatever don't exist for white people, or that they're not white people in those urbanized areas. But they're generally predominantly black.
Yeah. And
they stay like that, and no one really generally tries to control those school systems. Like recently we had it where two schools that were very terrible combined with another school, and it helped the demographic rise, and they were able to put a lot more money into it, and the graduation rates increased. But like it didn't stay like that for a while. It wasn't like that at the beginning. So yeah, I would say paying attention to the urbanized communities, putting money out there, teaching the financial intelligence to those groups where they don't really have much of it. It's just because it's kind of a continued thing throughout history. I mean, that ability to provide that information to blacks is just not necessarily that high. So even from the civil rights era and all that stuff. If you push down a group for so long, and though they tried and they choose not to do it, when they get the opportunity, they're kind of thrown out to the wolves. So, and the same thing happened with slavery, because once it was abolished, most people were like, oh yeah, you got rid of slaves. Technically, but they didn't do anything for them. They just let go of slavery. It got to the point where a lot of them stayed doing it just because they didn't even know what to do outside of it, because they still couldn't read, etc. So like when you look at that, it's like, well, you have a history of it having a group kind of just being tossed out and having to work for themselves, which goes into how we're like racially unified, because we developed our own culture. We identified ourselves under very specific kinds of music. We handled ourselves within the kinds of arts or intelligence that we got into. So sure, we can do that, but that's a hard fight. Why not assist that group that's been adding so much to the U.S. in that way? That's the way I look at it. Why not assist them? And it doesn't mean that you have to constantly put in their pockets. Government assistance is not the only thing. I mean, honestly, you do that to people for too long, it's not even a crutch anymore. They just use it forever and they never learn anything. To actually get them to do something for themselves, you actually have to be able to teach those people, change the schools in that community, and don't send them down a path that just eventually ends up being, fathers that don't stick around, people going to jail, people who shoot each other, and etc. It's like that path starts there. Starts with paying attention to the neighborhood schools. So I would say that's the biggest obstacle. So, now my question would be, is how do you think being a Mexican in the U.S. has affected your education, like from the beginning, elementary and up, and your career goals?
So, I can't deny that being raised in the U.S. has given me privileges other people don't have south of the border. This country is better economically, has more stability, it's safer. Despite the racism, it's still safer. So it's framed me to where I grew up in this society to where it's now you have that ambition instilled in you that you have to climb, that you have to get financially stable, you have to be financially successful, you have to do well in school to get those tools. So I don't know if I would be the same person had I been raised in Mexico. I would like to think I would still be the same ambitious person, but it might not have happened.
Yeah.
So I think it's affected me in everything. Like being raised in the U.S. it's been instrumental in my personality and who I am as a person. Had I not been raised here, I doubt I'd be the same. So I am grateful for that. Like the U.S. has its flaws, but I love the U.S. very much. Like this is my home, despite all the racism I've faced. I do still love the U.S. a lot. And eventually I'll get my citizenship here shortly. But yeah, that's one thing I've been missing. But yeah, I mean, there's also some of a disconnect though, because being raised here has I know Spanish, but I don't know Spanish as well as English. Like, so I can have conversations in Spanish and I'm good, but I can't have a super in-depth conversation maybe like this one in Spanish without stumbling and constantly having to Google what this word means or how to translate this one word. That's what I usually struggle with. It's not even a whole sentence or how to say. It's just always one word that I lack in a given sentence because it's a complex word that I know in English and I don't know how to say it in Spanish.
Yeah.
So it's just like little things like that. And I know with my brothers, like I was born in Mexico and I was brought here and I grew up when I was 4, but my brothers that were born here, it seems like they've struggled more than me in terms of the disconnect from being Mexican and knowing Spanish and all that, so they can't have this like close relations with my parents or with their grandparents because of that reason. So that does suck. You do have that disconnection.
Oh yeah.
Because you are raised in another country.
All right.
So for the final question I got for you is, I've kind of noticed this at A&M because I saw some of these posts before, but is there a problem with black men dating outside their race? They seem to get criticized for this, and I don't understand why this is a big issue.
Oh, wow. All right. I don't even know, like, the criticism kind of, it's more internal within the racial group than it is by people outside of it. I'm not going to say that it isn't. It does happen when you have, like, let's say a black man dates a white woman and the father's like, this is an interracial relationship. But I wouldn't say that he's attacking it for the sake of him being black. I don't think he would probably struggle with any race more than likely. in those kinds of situations. But very commonly, because like the interracial thing doesn't like, it's never black men that are angry at black women that I have seen, at least for this. It is always the women mad at the guys for it. Now, what I've understood by it is that it's like a lack of respect for the women within your own group. That if we're trying to uphold one another, then you date within your own kind, etc. Points that are, I'm not going to say are like invalid, you know what I mean? But the kind of hatred that comes from it, it's like, it's quite extreme. So some of them actually have this belief that some of them like I guess it's like this idea of dating a black woman, like black women are strong, and like dating a white woman would be because you could like, you know, take advantage, they're softer, etc. Which in reality, I would just say those are just elements of character of a person. You know, you can stereotype the mentalities of certain groups for sure, but I mean, I think it's kind of unsafe for people just to assume that that's the case. I think if you're choosing to date interracially, for most black men who do it, it's just because they've opened up their boundaries to explore. Is really what most of the time it is. So for ladies who see this, like, don't judge dudes, just really like inconsiderate, especially like to give them looks, sideline them while they're out there. Most guys who are dating interracially don't hate their own race. Most of them. I'm not telling you that they didn't exist. I have seen it, but for most of them, it's really just they've explored their boundaries. They're in a place. It's a multi-ethnical, multi-racial country. Yeah. You keep yourself locked down of options realistically if you just say, I have to date the person that's black. I'm like, well, for myself, let's say, for example, you know, I like black women. I'm attracted to black ladies. I always have been. I'm also attracted to white ladies, and Latinas, and etc. But I am. But I can say that very commonly when I talk to black women, I don't relate as much, just because, you know, some of the things that I'm more interested in, I you know, in the school system that I went to when I was older, I had a lot more white friends. So some of the things that I have developed interest in certain ways just doesn't resonate. And sometimes it just doesn't work out, which so a lot of times makes it look like it's more suitable for me to be with another race. I don't lock myself down to looking down that aisle just to say that, but why not explore the options if that happens to be the case? That's what I would do if I was talking to a Chinese girl for a long time and I kept talking to Chinese girls and realized that we don't resonate with certain things. It's just like, well, why would I keep myself fixed to that? So
yeah, that's true. I was gonna ask, like, kind of like as a second follow-up to that, would you say that the reaction is more visceral if it's a black man dating a white woman, or is it the same if he was dating a native/Latino woman, or
no? It's always when it's a white lady.
So it's way worse when it's a white.
Yeah,
person.
I've always, like, no matter what, it seems to be that's the case. I've never seen it whenever the girl is because they have this belief. I'm not gonna like define what it is, but from what it looks like, I think it's just dating the opposition, if that makes sense.
Right.
So, like, you can at least relate to another minority somewhat. You know what I mean? If it's an Asian or if it's a Latina girl or anything like that, like, there's still this idea that, you know, they relate to the black community in some way. I'm assuming this is like the psychology behind this, but to date a white person would be just giving in to the people that oppressed by taking their women, which I don't know. It's just kind of how I look at it. If people were to look deep enough inside themselves, or the ladies that are saying these kinds of things, I think that's the root cause. It's an overall offense of the white culture towards black culture. But I would encourage you not to look at it that way. Likelihood is that person they're dating is for those reasons, and generally you'll catch that those white people that are with them, they're some of the most openly welcome to the black culture out of most people. They understand it more, they want to accept it more, or they advocate for black rights or black or defending black issues and things like that. So don't just say, you know, oh, he's dating a white person and call it. You know what I mean? Likelihood is not like that. He's just exploring his options. But yeah. This is the last one, correct?
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
So, what do you believe is the biggest contribution that Mexican Americans have to the USA?
So this is where people might say I'm being stereotypical, but I'm not being stereotypical. The thing is that Mexicans have built this country very well because of the construction. The stereotype exists there for a reason. My dad, just in this city, has built thousands of homes. Him and his workers, and that's just my dad. So I think Mexicans have built a lot of this country off their hard sweat, their labor, and I think that's one of the biggest contributions ever, and people don't appreciate that at all.
Yeah.
And I think that's extremely ungrateful. And like I said, they do the work in the fields. They're in California, and they had the Braceros program where the farm workers from Mexico would come here legally to work as farm workers, and then they would be sent back.
Yeah.
So it's just Mexicans have kept the economy in this country going. They have contributed a lot to it. And I just see us getting treated like vermin all the time. Like, that's how we're treated. Like, I grew up feeling like I was a rat. like legit. Like, just how some of the attitudes are against Mexicans. So, yeah, that's I would say that's probably the biggest contribution Mexicans have had to this country.
All right. Yeah, I think that is most frequently neglected thing by people, not realizing the amount of work that you all do in general, and a lot of it's the work that most people aren't willing to actually do themselves. It's hard labor. It's labor that's relatively actually like nasty, long hours, things like that. The jobs that people say are being taken are actually the ones that people don't want.
Right. Like, I remember I read just in Huntsville here a couple years ago, I read that they were struggling to find construction workers, so they were telling people, you don't have to have any experience in construction work whatsoever. We'll pay you $15 an hour to come work construction, because they were that desperate. They were that short on construction. It's because white Americans and like, I mean, black people, it seems like, usually don't like to work construction jobs. I mean, they're hard. You're under the sun. Like, it's you freaking bust your balls, like, doing this shit.
Yeah.
So, and I guess one of the reasons why Mexicans do it well is in Mexico, you gotta scrape to survive. Like, in Mexico, you don't have it's $1 equals 20 pesos in Mexico, and that hardly gets you anywhere. And a lot of the jobs only pay you 500 pesos a week. So if you do the quick math, that's not much. That's not even $100 that you'll get in a week in Mexico. So that's why it's like Mexicans will come here, and you guys might think it's breadcrumbs what they're working for or what they're trying to do, and that they're being pathetic, but really it's twice as better, it's 2 times better or 3 times better than what they were experiencing in Mexico when they come here. So, and so then they try their hardest because they want to make the most out of it.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's us discussing some topics on that. You guys let us know what you think. If you have any suggestions for any other video topics or things that he and I could question on one another, whatever it is, let us know in the comments. But hope that truth slaps, and we'll see you guys next time.
See you next time.